Hi everyone, Dr. Justin Golston here. And in this video, we're going to address the first two objectives within this module, and that we're going to explain the importance of new employee onboarding and orientation, as well as the factors that are going to influence training and development within employees of an organization. So if you have been hired in a new role, you have experience in that first day. You have those first day employment jitters. And traditionally, you will be introduced to a number of your peers within an organization. You will be given a tour of the organization. If you have a virtual role, you will be meeting a number of your peers virtually, right, to understand their backgrounds, as well as you want to become acclimated with how you can collaborate on future projects, and well as how you can collaborate in having them assist you in onboarding, having them share their experiences within the organization, having them assist you in how to be most successful within a company. Now, if you frame it like you're the HR manager, if you frame that like you are the leader of the organization, how would you frame that? How would you onboard new employees so that they are most comfortable, so that you are setting them up for success for the first day of the organization, as well as the remainder of their tenure within the organization? So that's one thing that you would need to think about, because that's very important as you are creating the onboarding methodology for your organization. That is important as you are creating your employee handbook for your organization, because in a traditional sense, whenever new employees are onboarded, they want to get into the day-to-day operations, right? So you need to make that onboarding as interactive as possible, so that they can easily understand how to hit the ground running within your organization, if you will. And I think that at the end of the day, you need to make those employees as comfortable as possible and as successful as possible during that orientation and onboarding phase. So when we think about this from a strategic perspective, we have to think about training and development. And training and development are technically different, but they're very similar, in practice, in that, from a training perspective, you are training an employee on something new, right? Where on development, that employee already has the foundational knowledge of roles or responsibilities, and you are further fine tuning that employee's current role. You are making that employee more empowered. You're making that employee more valuable within that organization. Now, in order to do that, you need to look at a number of factors that influence the training and development of all of your employees. And there are a number of questions that you should ask yourself. There are a number of questions that you should ask, or you should discuss among the leaders of your organization. There's a number of questions you should ask among your workforce, because your workforce is how you can get that voice of the customer, right? Because that workforce is going to provide you with the tools they need. They're going to provide you with the inputs that you need to create the most effective workforce possible. So, some of the questions that you can ask, and these questions are also identified as a needs assessment. So a needs assessment is used a lot in other areas, especially whenever you're developing a new project, right? Especially whenever you're developing a business strategy. But we can actually take the same exact approach and transfer it to the practice of human resources management. So some of the questions that you could ask yourself, you could ask your fellow leaders of your organization, that you could ask your workforce is, the first question is there a gap between what people know or can do, or what do they need to know or do? So what that means is that, yes, in the employee handbook, we have outlined certain job functions, certain requirements, right? So is that employee handbook, is the expectations of the organization clear to new employees? Is the information that we have documented of our expectations as an organization, as a leadership team, clear to existing employees? So for existing employees, do they understand what they have to do to get a raise? Do they understand what they have to do to get promoted? Right? So another thing that you should ask from an HR perspective is, as we move on, as we look to fill new roles, is this a job that the organization still needs? And what we mean by that is that with the pandemic has forced organizations to pivot. It has forced organizations to rethink their business models. Now, also technology has allowed organizations to become more efficient. Technology has allowed organizations to automate a number of different processes. So for new roles as well as for existing roles, you should assess every single role within an organization to see if that job is indeed still needed. Now, if that job is not needed, that does not mean that you lay off the workforce, those employees within that role. That means you find more value added activities that you can transition those employees into, right? So because you have automated a process that was previously manual and done by employees, by individuals in your workforce, those employees have knowledge of the organization. Those employees have knowledge of the processes that are performed within the organization. Now, those skills can be transferred to other roles within the organization to make you more effective, to make you more efficient, to make you more profitable. Next question. Are job descriptions up to date? So for a needs assessment, so once we're hiring new employees, so one step that you can do when hiring new employees is that you can say, okay, we hired this new employee. Now let's go perform a lessons learned based on that interviewing process. Did that employee provide competencies that we did not even identify on the job description? Did those employees provide competencies that we could include in a job description for another role? Now, I say that because a number of organizations essentially have tunnel vision. They focus on the operations within their individual organization. As you are looking to build a workforce, you are going to be going outside of your four walls. So those people that you're going to interview are going to have different competencies. They're going to have different experiences. They're going to have different skills. So learn from that. You're going to be interviewing a number of people for these roles. So do not review that. Do not assess that simply as a exercise just to fill that role. Use that as a learning exercise. That way you can provide more input to future job postings. That way you can provide input to existing roles within your organization. So if an employee that you interview provided a competency that may or may not be applicable to their role, now they can be mentors. They can add additional value to your organization by being a mentor to another employee in another department to increase the effectiveness and efficiencies within your organization, right? So use the interviewing process as a lessons learned. Use that as an experience to see if job descriptions need to be updated to keep up with the current job market, to keep up with the current developments in the industry and around the world So next, you need to ask what new technology is available to make the task more effective and efficient. So we briefly touched on this in terms of technology. Technology is changing rapidly, changing very quickly. So with the introduction of the Internet of Things, with the introduction of artificial intelligence, with the introduction of the metaverse, so Mark Zuckerberg has validated the inclusion of the metaverse within our daily lives, as well as within the industry, within our daily work environments. So if you look at Horizon, Mark Zuckerberg, that's one of the primary use cases Mark Zuckerberg presented, where we can actually put on these Oculus VR headsets, where we can have employees from around the world to essentially come together within a metaverse space. So now, how does that impact our organization from an HR perspective? Right now, do we have in job postings that you have to have experience, with AR in the metaverse? Right, probably not in the short term, but I would say in a few years that may be the case. That may be the case for certain roles. Right. So technology is going to be technological advancements are going to be very, 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 very important. And we've seen that in recent years where, in certain industries such as manufacturing, you have to have enterprise resource planning experience, for certain roles. So technology will continue to have an impact from an HR perspective and in hiring employees. And then the final thing we're going to discuss in this video is, again, another assessment is, are there accidents that could have been prevented through training? So also this is more for the onboarding process, the orientation and onboarding process, where we can once again do a lessons learned. And as we are reviewing our employee handbook, should we look back to say, okay, are there preventative measures that needs to be included in the onboarding, in the orientation, in the employee handbook to prevent accidents from happening in the future? Okay. Now, in some spaces, that might be difficult to comprehend. But so, for example, in manufacturing and in distribution facilities, if you are onboarding a number of employees, either because of high turnover, because in manufacturing and distribution there are high turnover rates with hourly employees. So you can include an employee handbook. You can include within the training to onboard these employees that are going to be around this heavy machinery, this sharp machinery, in certain environments where there are a number of forklifts driving around. Right, you can look at that, you can perform an assessment on that, and then you can decide whether or not that needs to be in the onboarding, needs to be in the orientation, or needs to be in the training. So that's all we're going to discuss in this video. And until next time.